coming!
At dawn, the valley looked ordinary. A narrow strip of farmland broken by frozen irrigation channels, scattered trees, and a shallow river that curved like a scar through the earth. To the untrained eye, it was just another forgotten patch of eastern Ukraine. But beneath the silence, beneath the snow-dusted soil and shattered fences, a trap was waiting. Ukrainian commanders had studied this valley for weeks, mapping every ridge, every ditch, every blind corner. They knew exactly how Russia would move. And they knew exactly how to let them in. Russian forces had been pushing hard in this sector. Their strategy was simple: overwhelm with numbers, flood the front line, and grind forward meter by meter. Intelligence reports showed massive troop movements, armored columns assembling, and supply convoys stacking up behind the lines. Moscow wanted a breakthrough here, and they were ready to pay for it in blood. Ukrainian drones tracked everything. Every vehicle, every platoon, every fuel truck was logged, tagged, and analyzed. Patterns emerged. Russian units always funneled through the valley. It was the fastest route, the safest, they believed. Natural cover shielded them from long-range fire. The river mass sound and the low ground hid movement from radar. It looked like the perfect corridor. Ukraine saw something else: a coffin. Instead of blocking the approach, Ukrainian forces pulled back. Frontline units withdrew just enough to make the valley seem open. Defensive positions went silent. Artillery stopped firing. Even drone activity decreased. To Russian commanders, it looked like collapse. A weak point. A door left unlocked. Orders came down quickly. Advance immediately. Seize the valley. Push through before Ukraine could regroup. Convoys rolled. Infantry flooded in. Tanks led the columns, their engines echoing between the hills. Behind them came armored personnel carriers, trucks packed with soldiers, fuel tankers, and ammunition haulers. By mid-morning, thousands of Russian troops were pouring into the narrow corridor. Inside the Russian formations, confidence mixed with exhaustion. Many soldiers had been fighting for months without rest. They were hungry for progress, desperate for a victory that would justify the losses they had already suffered. Commanders pushed their units forward with relentless urgency. Timetables were tight. Fuel consumption was high. Every minute mattered. Speed, they were told, would save lives. Delay would mean disaster. None of them knew disaster was already waiting. Above them, unseen, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones hovered at extreme altitude. Satellite feeds updated command centers in real time. Electronic warfare units jammed Russian communications just enough to cause confusion, but not enough to raise alarms. Every step of the advance was being measured. Ukrainian commanders waited. They needed density. They needed congestion. They needed Russia to commit fully. And Russia did exactly that. As the lead units pushed deeper, the valley began to choke. Vehicles slowed. Columns compressed. Tanks were forced to move bumper to bumper. Infantry dismounted and marched along the edges, crammed between frozen riverbanks and steep slopes. Supply trucks stacked up behind combat units, unable to overtake. It became a single, massive, vulnerable mass of men and machines. From above, it looked like a living artery pulsing with steel and bodies. The deeper they moved, the more the geography closed around them. Hills tightened. The river narrowed. Escape routes vanished one by one. Some Russian soldiers sensed something was wrong. Radios filled with overlapping chatter. Navigation systems glitched. Officers struggled to maintain formation, but momentum carried them forward. Orders were orders. Stopping now would mean chaos. So they kept going, deeper into the trap. Then the signal came. Within seconds, Ukrainian artillery batteries lit up across multiple sectors. Precision-guided shells screamed into the valley, striking the front, the middle, and the rear of the column simultaneously. Bridges collapsed. Road choke points vanished in explosions. The valley turned into a sealed chamber. Russian vehicles at the front were obliterated. Those in the rear tried to reverse, only to find the exits destroyed. Panic rippled through the ranks. Radios crackled with overlapping screams and broken commands. Before Russian units could react, Ukrainian rocket artillery joined the barrage. Salvos of cluster munitions rained down, saturating the packed formations. Armored vehicles were shredded. Infantry had nowhere to run. The slopes that once offered concealment now trapped shockwaves, magnifying the destruction. Smoke filled the air, thick and black, blotting out the sky. The sound was constant. Thunder layered over screaming metal, collapsing engines, and human cries. Russian units attempted to deploy smokescreens and defensive countermeasures, but the scale of the bombardment made resistance futile. Vehicles burned so intensely that ammunition inside detonated, sending fragments flying across the valley. Fuel trucks erupted into towering fireballs, incinerating everything nearby. Soldiers abandoned their equipment and ran blindly, only to be cut down by secondary explosions or buried beneath collapsing earth. Then came the second phase. FPV drones, dozens at a time, swarmed into the chaos. Each carried an explosive charge. They dove into tank hatches, slammed into troop carriers, and chased fleeing soldiers. Thermal cameras picked out bodies against the cold ground. No movement went unseen. Every attempt to regroup was punished instantly. Survivors described the drones as relentless hunters buzzing overhead before diving in sudden, unstoppable strikes. Russian commanders attempted to call in air support, but Ukrainian air defense systems were waiting. Surface-to-air missiles streaked upward, forcing Russian aircraft to stay at distance. Helicopter units that tried to approach were driven off or destroyed. The valley became a killing bowl, sealed from escape, sealed from rescue. Those inside were alone. Hours passed. The bombardment never truly stopped, it only shifted. Artillery would pause briefly, just long enough for survivors to think the worst was over. Then another wave would crash down. The psychological effect was devastating. Units disintegrated, small groups tried to climb the valley walls, only to be cut down by sniper fire and machine guns positioned on high ground. Others attempted to hide among wrecked vehicles. Drones found them. Some simply lay motionless, waiting for the end. As darkness approached, fires illuminated the valley like a burning city. Shadows flickered across shattered metal and broken bodies. The smell of fuel, smoke, and blood hung heavy in the air. The cries of the wounded echoed against the hills unanswered. Medics could not reach them. Commanders could not save them. Entire battalions vanished in a single day. By evening, the valley was unrecognizable. Burned-out hulks of tanks littered the ground. Trucks lay overturned, still smoldering. Craters pockmarked the earth like a disease. Bodies lay everywhere, frozen in twisted positions. The river ran dark with oil, fuel, and blood. What had been a corridor of advance had become a mass grave. Ukrainian reconnaissance teams advanced cautiously through the ruins. Their task was to confirm kills, gather intelligence, and secure the area. They moved past destroyed battalions, past shattered armor brigades, past piles of abandoned equipment. Russian personal documents, maps, radios, and orders were scattered across the field. It became clear just how massive the force had been. This wasn't a probing attack, it was a full-scale push, and it had been annihilated. Captured soldiers spoke of confusion and disbelief. Many claim they never saw Ukrainian forces until the artillery struck. Others described the sky suddenly tearing open. Some said they thought the entire front had collapsed. None had imagined such a coordinated, precise response. For many, the shock was as devastating as the explosions themselves. Interrogations revealed the scale of the deception. Russian troops had been told Ukrainian defenses were collapsing. That resistance was minimal. That speed was essential. Many had expected to break through within hours. Instead, they walked into a meticulously prepared trap. Every withdrawal, every silent position, every gap in the line had been intentional. Ukraine had engineered not just a battlefield ambush, but a psychological collapse. News of the disaster raced up the Russian chain of command. Emergency meetings were called. Reinforcements were halted. Entire offensive plans were scrapped overnight. The psychological impact rippled across the front. Units scheduled to attack hesitated. Commanders grew cautious. Momentum vanished. For weeks afterward, Russian forces avoided similar terrain, slowing their operations and giving Ukraine valuable time to reinforce other sectors. For Ukraine, the operation marked a turning point. It proved that intelligence, patience, and precision could overcome sheer numbers. This was not just a battlefield victory, it was a strategic statement. Russia could no longer rely on mass alone. Every movement now risked catastrophic loss. The battlefield had changed, and Ukraine was setting the rules. The valley became a symbol. Ukrainian soldiers referred to it as the silent grave. Russian units spoke of it in whispers. Satellite images circulated among analysts worldwide showing the scale of devastation. Dozens of destroyed vehicles, hundreds of confirmed casualties, possibly thousands more unaccounted for. Military academies began dissecting the operation, studying how deception, timing, and terrain had combined into one devastating strike. And yet, the most chilling aspect was how calmly it had all unfolded. There was no dramatic charge, no last stand, no heroic clash, just calculated patience followed by overwhelming force. Ukraine had turned Russia's greatest strength, numbers, into its greatest weakness. The battlefield was no longer defined by who had more soldiers, but by who understood the ground, the technology, and the human mind. As winter deepened, snow began to fall over the wreckage, slowly covering the scars. But beneath that white blanket lay the remains of an entire offensive. A reminder etched into the frozen soil that in modern warfare, intelligence and strategy decide fate long before the first shot is fired. The valley became a frozen monument to miscalculation. Months later, survivors still spoke of that day. Of the silence before the storm, of the moment the sky erupted, of the helplessness as escape routes vanished. For them, the valley was no longer a place on a map. It was a nightmare that returned in their sleep. The land itself seemed changed. Craters filled with ice, twisted metal jutted from the snow, trees stood blackened and broken, and beneath it all, unseen, lay the countless remains of soldiers who would never return home. Their families would receive notices. Some would receive nothing at all. The valley had swallowed them. The message was unmistakable. Advance blindly and you will not be stopped. You will be erased. In this new era of warfare, visibility means vulnerability. Concentration means destruction. And speed, without caution, becomes a death sentence. Somewhere beyond the horizon, commanders on both sides took note, because in this war, the ground itself had learned how to kill. And in that silent Ukrainian valley, the earth still waits, holding the memory of the day Russia filled it and never left.